The air was thick with the taste of ash. Sirens wailed from somewhere beyond the haze, each one sharper, more urgent than the last. Ethan's hands moved fast. Shirts, jeans, canned food all shoved into cardboard boxes, his fingers trembling. Just enough to betray the calm mask on his face. Through the thin walls of the house, the roar of the approaching fire was a constant reminder that time was bleeding away. The sky outside had turned a strange, angry orange, and with every gust of wind, the scent of burning pine pressed closer. 16-year-old Ethan had always been the steady wonder boy who didn't panic when others did. He stacked another box neatly beside the door, his movements precise. But inside, the knot in his stomach was tightening. His father was miles away, unreachable. His mother's face was pale in the dim light, and though neither of them said it aloud, both knew they were on their own tonight. When Ethan stepped outside with the next load, the street was a blur of motion. Mrs. Hayes clutched a stack of photo albums to her chest, her lips pressed into a thin, unyielding line. 2 houses down, children cried in the back of a dusty pickup, while their father shouted for someone to close the tailgate. The hot wind slapped at Ethan's face, carrying with it a flurry of glowing embers that stung his eyes and clung to his sleeves. He had just slid the last box into the trunk when a voice cut through the chaos. "Rex. Somebody's got to get Rex." Ethan froze. He knew that name, the big German shepherd from the park. Rex's owner had been taken to the hospital that morning, and no one had seen the dog since. The thought of him trapped somewhere, alone, in this choking heat, made Ethan's chest feel suddenly heavier. His mother's gaze found him. No words, just the kind of look that carried an entire conversation. "Stay in the car. Be safe." But Ethan didn't move. There was something pulling at him, deep and certain, like an invisible tether tied to his chest. He couldn't explain it, even to himself. The evacuation line inched forward, engines rumbling in the smoky air. Ethan sat in the back seat, his hands resting uselessly on his knees, eyes fixed on the road behind them. Somewhere in that maze of smoke and flickering light, Rex was waiting. The image of the dog alone, waiting, would not leave him. And Ethan knew this wasn't over. Through the shifting grey haze, Ethan's gaze snagged on a fleeting shadow, large German shepherd weaving between backyards, each sharp bark cutting through the dull roar of the fire. His fur, normally golden and clean, was streaked with soot, the tips singed from the embers swirling around them. The animal's movements were urgent, almost frantic, as though trying to outrun the smoke itself. Ethan's chest tightened. The sight felt wrong to deliberate, too desperate, like a living signal flare calling for help in a world that was collapsing. The shepherd stopped suddenly at the edge of Ethan's driveway. His paws scraped against the cracked pavement as he paced in tight circles, panting hard. Then, without a sound, he bolted toward the street, his stride long and purposeful, until he reached the gate of a house 2 doors down. He turned back, locking eyes with Ethan through the shifting smoke. There was no mistaking it. The dog wasn't just running for his life. He was asking Ethan to come, pleading. Ethan didn't move. His sneakers felt cemented to the ground, the heat from the street pressing against his skin. Behind him, his mother's voice cut through the chaos, urgent but cracking at the edges. "Ethan, get in the car." The fire roared louder, the wind whipping sparks like tiny blades past his face. But his gaze stayed locked on Rex. The world had narrowed to 2 voices, the human one telling him to leave, and the silent one telling him he couldn't. Everyone out now. A firefighter bellowed, his voice raw with urgency. Winds shifting the flames are coming straight through here. The words stabbed through Ethan's chest. Around him, engines roared to life and car tires crunched over gravel. Rex took a step closer to his own front door, glancing back as if to remind Ethan of something unspoken. The air between them was thick, not just with smoke, but with a decision Ethan could feel pressing down on him like weight. The image hit him Rex in the park months ago, his head pressed against Mr. Adler's thin, trembling leg while the old man fed him scraps from a paper bag. Ethan remembered the way Rex's eyes never left his owner's face, even when other dogs ran by, loyal, protective, wholehearted. Now Mr. Adler was gone, taken to the hospital earlier that morning, and no one had come back for Rex. The realization hollowed Ethan's stomach. If he didn't go now, no one would. The line of cars ahead barely moved, a slow, hopeless procession toward safety. Ethan's hand trembled as it found the door handle. "Ethan, no," his mother's voice cracked, her eyes wide with panic. "I'll be back," he said, the words rough and final. Before she could grab him, he slipped out, the door slamming shut behind him. His sneakers hit the pavement, and the world outside the car seemed sharper, louder, hotter. Rex was already watching him, waiting. Ethan took off toward the smoke, each step heavier than the last. The air thickened, scratching at his throat, making his eyes water. His lungs burned, but he didn't stop. Ahead, the road blurred into a wall of haze, the world beyond swallowed by the storm of heat and ash. He pushed forward anyway, guided by the rhythmic flash of Rex's tail disappearing into the fog, and the stubborn, desperate hope that he wasn't too late. Through the curtain of grey smoke, Ethan spotted Rex at the front gate of Mr. Adler's silent house. The German shepherd was a blur of motion, barking, spinning, pressing his paws against the locked metal, then darting his gaze from the street. Behind him to Ethan, in front. The dog's eyes were wide, their deep brown flecked with panic, and every movement carried urgency. Behind Rex, the stillness of the house felt wrong, like it had been holding its breath for too long. Ethan hesitated. At the edge of the driveway, the acrid air stinging his eyes, but the sight of that desperate, soot-streaked face pulled him closer. Ethan moved slowly, lowering himself into a crouch, his knees protesting against the rough pavement. "Hey, buddy, it's okay," he murmured, his voice low and steady despite the pounding in his chest. The dog's tail flicked once uncertain before, going still again. Ethan slipped off his jacket, holding it out in front of him like a peace offering. The fabric fluttered in the wind, carrying his scent forward. Rex's nostrils flared. His muscles, tight as coiled wire, eased just enough for him to step closer. A tentative sniff, then a single, slow wag of the tail. For the first time since spotting him, Ethan exhaled. The front door stayed stubbornly shut, the metal knob hot under Ethan's palm. He circled the porch, testing windows, but each one was locked tight. "Come on, Rex. Think," he muttered, as if the dog could answer. To his surprise, Rex trotted toward the side of the house, pausing at a window cracked open just enough to catch a glimpse inside. Through the sliver, Ethan spotted a coiled leash on the floor and, beside it, a small medical bag with the Red Cross printed on the side. His heart tightened. Mr. Adler needed that. Rex gave a sharp bark, as if confirming Ethan's thoughts, and nudged the siding with his nose. They had barely taken 2 steps back when a deafening crack split the air. A massive branch, scorched at its edges, slammed to the ground behind them. Rex froze mid-stride, his body folding low to the dirt. His entire frame trembled, eyes wide, ears flattened tight against his skull. Without thinking, Ethan dropped to one knee beside him, draping an arm over his back. "It's okay. You're okay. I've got you," he whispered, the words a rhythm against the chaos. Slowly, Rex's shivering eased, and his head lifted toward Ethan's face, as though weighing the truth in his voice. They set off again, sticking close to the narrow strip of road. The air grew heavier with each breath, thick with the taste of burning pine. Ethan coughed into his sleeve, the sound muffled but persistent. Each time it happened, Rex slowed his pace, glancing back as if to check whether Ethan could still keep up. Even when Ethan waved him forward, the dog matched his stride instead. His body angled slightly toward him, like a silent shield. The steady thump of paws against the cracked asphalt became the only rhythm that kept Ethan moving. The way ahead abruptly vanished in a tangle of downed power lines, the cables spitting faint sparks into the dirt. Ethan swore under his breath, scanning the horizon. The orchard stretched off to their right, the gnarled rows of trees offering a path if they dared take it. Heat pressed in from every direction, and the fire's roar was closer now, like an approaching tide. Rex gave a sharp bark, then darted toward the orchard's edge, pausing to make sure Ethan followed. Ethan hesitated only a moment before stepping off the road, the dry grass crunching underfoot. They stopped beneath the twisted skeleton of a fig tree, its leaves long gone, its bark blackened and peeling. Here, the heat was less fierce, the air only slightly clearer. Ethan leaned against the trunk, pulling in shallow breaths. Rex sat beside him, chest rising and falling in unison with his own. Ethan's fingers brushed the dog's fit, was coarse and still warm from the sun, streaked with ash. I never cared for dogs, Ethan thought, his gaze fixed on Rex's alert profile. But leaving you here, that's not even an option anymore. A sudden gust tore through the orchard, and with it came a storm of glowing embers, spinning and drifting like fiery snow. Ethan flinched as one landed on his sleeve, swatting it away before it burned through. Rex barked sharply, his gaze fixed. On the shifting glow in the distance, the wind had changed. They would need to change too. Ethan's pulse quickened, but his steps fell in line with Rex's, both of them moving instinctively, side by side, deeper into the unknown. The air changed first, a sudden, violent gust that carried the smell of burning pine and something sharper, like scorched metal. Then came the glow, swelling over the horizon until the sky itself seemed to ignite. A roaring wall of flames advanced down the road, heat striking Ethan's face like an open furnace. Rex's body went rigid, a deep growl rumbling from his chest. Without waiting for a command, he pressed against Ethan's leg, nudging him toward the hill where the silhouette of an old high school stood against the burning skyline. There was no time to argue with instinct. The abandoned school loomed above. Them, its broken windows catching the orange glare like shards of molten glass. Smoke drifted from its edges, where fire had already gnawed at the roof. Yet beyond it, Ethan could see the open stretch of a sports field, green and untouched for now, like an island in a drowning sea. Every step toward it felt like a gamble, but the fire left no other road. They reached the edge of the field, breath ragged. Rescue might come here. The open air might keep them safe, but might wasn't enough. Flames were unpredictable, and the wind was shifting again. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears as he scanned the tree line, the road, the school behind them. He looked at Rex, who waited without fidgeting, ears pricked, eyes locked on him, ready to move the second he decided. A glint caught Ethan's eye movement behind one of the shattered gym windows. He stepped closer, squinting through the smoke, and his stomach clenched. Inside a huddle of animals, dogs and cats, maybe a dozen in all, crouched together. Their bodies tense, tails low, eyes huge and glassy. Smoke curled in lazy tendrils under the gym door, turning their panting into shallow, desperate gasps. Rex let out a sharp bark, pacing at the wall like he understood exactly what Ethan was seeing. The gym doors were chained shut with a rusted padlock, old enough to crumble but still stubborn. Ethan's hands shook as he grabbed a jagged rock from the ground. "Hang on, just hang on," he muttered, slamming the rock down with every ounce of strength left in him. The lock clanged against the metal and fell away. The doors burst open as if pushed from inside, and a chaotic rush of fur and paws spilled out, animals tumbling into the cooler air. Rex barked once, sharp and commanding, holding their scattered panic in check. Rex moved like a shadow with purpose, darting left, then right, barking in short bursts to steer the frightened cats and dogs toward the field. His body flowed with precision, the instinct of a protector in its purest form. Ethan followed, calling softly, his voice guiding where Rex's bark could not reach. Together, man and dog became a single force, driving the rescued toward the one patch of safety the fire hadn't yet claimed. The sound came like a gunshot, a violent crack that ripped through the air. Ethan turned in time to see part of the gym roof sag, then collapse, sending a spray of sparks across the ground. He stumbled back, his foot catching on a fallen beam. The heat closed in fast, a living thing lunging for him. Then a sharp pull at his sleeve, teeth, urgent and unyielding. Rex hauled him backward, dragging him clear just before the flames. Claimed the space where he'd stood. Sirens wailed in the distance, cutting through the chaos. Fire trucks emerged like ghosts at the edge of the field, their red lights muted in the thick, choking haze. But the smoke was so dense, the rescuers almost passed them by. Ethan waved his arms, coughing until his lungs burned. Rex barked loud and sharp, the sound carrying farther than Ethan's hoarse voice. The trucks slowed. They'd been seen. The firefighters dropped down, moving fast to load the animals first. When they reached for Ethan, he shook his head, pointing at Rex. Him first, he rasped, his throat raw. The firefighter didn't argue. Rex was lifted into the truck bed, tail wagging once as his paws hit the metal floor. Only then did Ethan allow himself to be pulled up, his knees buckling as the adrenaline began to drain. As the truck roared away, the fire's angry roar faded into the distance, replaced by the steady hum of the engine. Ethan's hand stayed knotted in Rex's fur, fingers buried deep, as though afraid that letting go would wake him from this fragile, improbable survival. Rex leaned into the grip, pressing against his side. The world beyond the smoke was uncertain, but in that moment, the bond between them felt unshakable, forged in fire, sealed in trust. The evacuation center buzzed with voices, footsteps, and the smell of coffee that had been brewing for hours. Ethan stumbled toward an empty cot, the weight of exhaustion pulling at every muscle. Rex pressed against his side before he could even sit, curling into the narrow space like a living shield. Volunteers passed by, setting down bowls of water, one for Rex, one for him, but Ethan only reached for the dog, fingers tangling in his soot-streaked fur. We made it, he thought, though his heart still echoed with the sound of flames. It was nearly midnight when the doors swung open, and his mother's voice cut through the hum of the room. "Ethan, She was running before he could stand, arms crushing him against her chest. Her tears dampened his shirt, but he held on, closing his eyes to the familiarity of her heartbeat. Then she knelt, trembling hands resting on Rex's head. "Thank you," she whispered to the dog, her voice breaking. Rex leaned into her touch, his eyes calm, as if he understood every word. Morning light filtered through the high windows, soft and golden. Ethan sat on the edge of the cot, watching. Rex dozed at his feet. A shadow fell across them, and Mr. Adler stepped forward, his lined face pale with emotion. "Ethan, you saved him," he said, voice tight. His gaze dropped to Rex, then back to the boy, words faltering. The silence between them was full of relief, of respect, of something like kinship. Ethan just nodded, swallowing hard, because saying you'd have done the same felt too small for the moment. They stood outside the center, the air smelling faintly of damp ash. Mr. Adler shifted. On his feet, eyes scanning the horizon before settling on Ethan. "I heard about your situation," he said gently. "Rex is yours to visit whenever you want. My door's always open." The offer wasn't just about a dog. It was a promise of belonging, a thread tying Ethan to something steady in a world that had almost burned away. "I'll take you up on that," Ethan said quietly, his lips twitching into the first real smile in days. Weeks later, the hills were green again where the fire had left its scars. Ethan walked the familiar dirt road toward Mr. Adler's home, now half rebuilt, its fresh wood bright against the old stone. The air was cool and clean, the first truly clear morning since the fire. He paused at the gate, breathing in deeply, the absence of smoke almost startling. Somewhere beyond the yard, a bark rang out, sharp and joyous. Ethan's chest tightened. Rex knew. The gate swung open just in time for Rex to barrel through, paws pounding the earth. He leaped against Ethan, tail wagging wildly, knocking him back a step with sheer force of joy. Ethan laughed, freely laughed hand wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. Together, they stepped into the yard, the sun warming their backs. For the first time since the fire, the world felt whole again. And in that quiet certainty, Ethan knew, some bonds don't just survive, they burn brighter for having faced the flames. Ethan often thought back to that moment standing at the edge of the smoke-choked road, hearing Rex's desperate bark through the roar of the fire. He hadn't known what waited for him in the haze. He only knew walking away wasn't an option. One step forward had changed everything. It wasn't about being ready or brave, it was about acting when someone needed you most. That choice became the beginning of a story neither of them could have imagined. In those days of ash and chaos, trust had been tested with every heartbeat. Rex had followed Ethan without hesitation, even when the path was uncertain and the heat unbearable, and Ethan had fought for Rex like he was family, because somewhere in those hours he had become just that. Danger had been the forge, and loyalty was the steel that came out of it unbreakable. No matter how many storms might come after, people told Ethan he had saved Rex's life. He didn't correct them, but deep down he knew the truth ran deeper. In pulling Rex from the flames, he'd found a reason to push past his own fears. Rex's trust had pulled him out of a loneliness he'd never spoken aloud. In saving one life, another had been quietly rescued his own. And so, Ethan carried with him a simple understanding. Sometimes the greatest changes start with the smallest acts. Sometimes, the life you save is the mirror that shows you your own worth. And sometimes, the truest friendships are born in the moments when running away seems easier yet you choose to stay.